Hey guys, it's Ethan again. I am gonna do a quick video of this Phoenix Props / 7 Chambers Imperial Knight lightsaber I just finished. This guy, I gotta tell you, is one of my favorites. Mostly because of how different it is, but also because of the overall quality of the hilt itself. It's a really, really beautifully machined, beautifully powder coated or electroplated finish. Just really just nice all around. Little elements about it make it really pop. Like, I love the thickness of the emitter here. I love the finish, how it's flat but slightly rounded. I love the cut on the angle on the bias. I love the fact that it's powder coated black on the inside to offset and to contrast the silver, and boy does it look good. All the little pieces, every little bit of this is just incredibly nicely finished. Like, this is the set screw actually for the blade. I thought it was just a design element when I bought it. I didn't realize, but that's the set screw, and it's beautifully finished. It's incredibly smooth. This little tiny greeble down here is actually a set screw for the chassis, and it's perfect. It's flawless. It's got a nice little bevel cut in the top of it. You can't even tell unless you look really close, and it's perfectly done. The bottom of the pommel, again, perfectly done. Everything about this was machined to perfection, and it's just something that you don't see all that often. So when you do, you really, well, when I do, I really appreciate it. You know, even the threads, like if you take one finger, that'll spin all the way off, and then put it back, and one finger again spins all the way down. I mean, those threads are just so perfectly done that it's effortless, and that is something you don't really see very often, and it's just really nice when you do. But this guy was fun to build. I want to say thank you to, I can't think of his name right now, but I picked this hilt as well as the chassis up off of eBay from a guy who was selling a lot of his lightsaber stuff. For personal reasons, he needed to get some money put together, and he had too much stuff sitting around that he hadn't done yet. So hope everything works out for him, and I want to say thank you, because it was a great deal, and everything was in immaculate condition, and so I'm glad that I could help him out, and I'm glad that he could help me out, taking care of me and sending me everything. Basically sent everything I needed to build this. But I think to show you guys this saber, the best way to do it is to strip it down and rebuild it, show you how everything works, and that's actually incredibly simple with this. So to do that, we start just by unscrewing this little set screw on the side here. Take that out to the side, and then if you loosen the pommel, you don't have to take it all the way out, and then twist the emitter. That's how you get to see your crystal reveal right there. And we'll get into that. Take the pommel off, and once you've done that, it's as simple as pulling out this little design element hook here, stainless steel, taking this rhodium piece off, and then popping this guy out. Once you do that, you can release the entire chassis, as simple as that. The buttons for this guy, let's see if I can show you without knocking them down. Nope, knocked them down. Buttons for this guy are plunger style, and what I mean by that is that there are two metal plungers that fit through the hilt and that stay in the hilt. And those, when you press them, press the actual switches that are mounted to the chassis on the inside. So these buttons right here, that's your power, and their auxiliary right there. So those guys are pressed by the plungers when you press them. So that's what's great about that, is the whole chassis is completely removable, but also completely self-sufficient, completely, well, totally complete if you were careful. And if you had incredibly steady hands, you could just hold this here, press the power button, and this would be a fully functional lightsaber on its own, just like that, which is pretty cool. But let's run through it real quick. Down at the bottom, you have your recharge port and your main power switch. Next up, speaker here. I managed to squeeze a 25 millimeter premium bass speaker in here. I think this was a KR Sabers premium speaker. This is designed for a 20 or a 22 millimeter speaker, but you know my tendency to overdo it if possible with speakers, and as you can see, it's pretty well crammed in there, but it does fit, and there is still room for the wires to sneak by it on the side. Up here in the channel, you can see the battery protection circuit. On this side you see the battery, which is the power supply, and this is one of my favorite things about this chassis design. As usual, this is a chassis from Goth 3 Designs, Rick Ryo's company. He does really nice work, and this, I don't know if this is something that may be coming standard in future designs of his, but the way he did the battery section here is that you can put a few different batteries in here, whichever is best for your application. It's intended to take an 18650, but you can put a 2650 or 2170 or 2160 in here, and there are little tabs in these holes here, and those are actually what grip the battery. So if you have an 18650, these would just be tighter and not pushed out as far, but the actual battery itself is held on the inside. It's like a cushion almost. So those expand or contract as necessary to fit whatever size battery you want, which is really cool, meaning that you can, if you've only got an 18650, cool, that's fine, and it will power your saber. But if you have a 5 amp hour big monster 2170, that'll fit right in here too. And it's just nice when you're working with Neopixels to have the extra capacity, because they do really drain a battery. Next up in this section you see obviously is the sound card, and you have your USB and SD access right there. On the back side is where all the wiring went, wiring that goes up into the blade connector and switches, wiring that runs down into the power and recharge and kill switch section. It's just some metal mesh I put in there for decoration because having a big gap there didn't look great. We have here the crystal chamber, all done in rhodium and steel, with dual crystal points. Let's see if I can show you guys that. Yeah, there we go. This was a little bit of a tough fit for the crystals, because I had to get these crystals to work, I had to drill out this bottom section of the crystal chamber, because before I drilled through it, the crystal only went as deep as right here, so it was really only good for a just over a quarter inch tall crystal, 3/8 of an inch tall maybe, and to be honest, it's basically impossible to find a crystal that small. And the smallest ones that I had are these two. So the crystal head, I drilled through the bottom here so that the crystal could go through it and slide down and sit down here. So now it's 5/8 inches or so, and the top one is also about 5/8 inches. But now you can actually fit them in there, which is key, because it's hard to find really tiny ones. Next up, this little gold guy right here is actually a backup power button, which I will explain the point of in a bit, but it's just a tiny micro button with little tiny micro wiring, and then neopixels here and here, obviously to illuminate the crystals, and a stock Custom Works pogo pin neopixel blade connector for onboard illumination. And that is basically the guts. So now let's slide her in, put her back together, and fire it up so you guys can see how it works. I'll keep knocking this button out. This actually is not really a problem with these buttons. They don't typically come out. I'm just having bad luck at the moment. But all you have to do to reinsert this now is to slide it in so that those buttons will line up with the plunger. So you just aim the crystal chamber towards the hole, right where it will be displayed, and then slide it up, and then it'll only go in if it's lined right. So if it's not going in, you just have to kind of twist it until it does go up. And that right there looks about perfect. Now, once you've got it in here, you take the two shroud pieces and pop them in order to lock it in place. Excusez-moi. There we go. There's one. And then this guy is two. Goes right there. And then this little steel U-ring goes up and through two holes that are here and into the chassis itself. It's actually really easy to do, except for me right now, evidently. Oh, usually it's easy to do. I jinxed myself. What are we doing wrong here? Guys, I apologize. Just bear with me for a second. I've never actually had any difficulty putting this in before. Of course, when you do the video, that's when everything acts up, which makes sense. Guess this guy's just a little crooked. That makes sense why it wouldn't line up. So there are little tiny holes in here and in the chassis that the little U-bent pipe goes through to lock everything in place, so the holes have to be lined up, and if they're not, then it's not going to work. There we go. So it just wasn't quite straight, which was causing the whole problem. Now, we spin this guy back around, and then to lock everything in place, we re-unscrew this little greeble, and that locks the chassis in place inside of the hilt. So notice nothing's coming out now. This guy's locked in place, easy access to everything. Put the pommel back on. Now, to do the reveal, just, here's the pommel all the way tight, just give it, a half a turn or one turn, and then remove this little screw. Then grab the top emitter and twist. And boom, Simple as that. If you want to lock that in place, you screw the pommel tight again, and now the whole thing is solid again. So you have the full crystal reveal right here, which is really nice, and the way that Goth designed it, it fills the cutout area perfectly. It's all crystal reveal, it's nice and snug, there are no gaps or anything like that. Really cool looking. I added some extra stuff of my own. This guy is also, as I said, an additional power switch now, as well as I added this element as just like a cosmetic design, but you need to have something to grab onto to remove this. And in order to do that, you want to have something that folds down so you can grab it and pull. And the idea here is, if you notice, if you look really closely, this guy's got some circuitry and wiring inside of it. And what that is, and it runs through to the inside, and what that is actually a tracking device and a radio transmitter, as well as a GPS beacon that the Empire puts in all their Imperial Knight sabers, so that they can't lose them, because these guys are constantly getting their heads cut off, arms cut off, just getting generally decimated by Jedi and or Bantha or whatever creatures are hanging out. And these things cost a lot of money, so you can't just lose them on Hoth or whatever planet you happen to send your troopers down to. These things are not cheap, so got a nice three-way homing beacon built into this, essentially, which allows the Empire to keep tabs on their troopers as well as their gear. So when you're using this, just bear in mind you are being tracked. But in addition to the homing beacons that are in here, this, as I said, acts as a secondary power switch. And let me show you why. This is the standard way it's going to look when you're using it, and here's your power switch, auxiliary switch. Pretty handy, right where your thumb goes, good functionality, but now what? Want to turn it on and see what the crystal looks like when it's illuminated. Uh-oh, how do you do that? You can smack it and maybe you'll get lucky and hit it, but it's one of the few design flaws with this setup. So you need at least a power button handy on this side. So I just figured I'd build one in right there, and it's a perfect spot for it. You just kind of give this a tap, and that way you get the full illumination of the crystal. The best part about doing this with the Teensysaber or Profi board is that you don't need an auxiliary button to cycle to the next blade preset. In order to do that, you just hold the power button and shake it. So in order to go to the next preset, you go. Simple as that. So rather than actually having to build in two buttons on this side, you just need to build in one, and then you can go through all the different blade presets, turn that on, turn it off, do blade lockups, do your force sounds. And do the audio player, as you can see. And mute it, as you can see. can do your force sounds, you can start the audio track per each blade's preset, you can toggle to the next blade, whatever you want to do. Let's just do a quick reset here so that we get back to the first blade, and I will show you guys what the blades look like. But actually, before we get there, let's put the blade plug back in. And this is not actually the blade plug for this saber because this saber didn't come with a blade plug, but I'm borrowing a Ben Solo blade plug right now. This goes with a different saber, but it looks really good in this hilt. It's a shame that they didn't include it. I'm going to see if I can get a few of these made just for this specific situation, but looks really nice. So that's your first blade, it is bright red. And let's put an actual blade in there so you guys can see. As I said, that's your blade retention screw, so that's locked in real easy.
On directory not found. On directory not found.
Looks like I whacked it a little too hard. Every once in a while, if you put a blade in slightly misaligned or something silly like that happens, the Teensysaber can act up and do some weird stuff, and if that happens, you just do a quick reset and then right back to basics again. So this is your first blade, standard bright red, fast ignite. Next up is a Sunburst Orange. This is a dark orange red. This is a slightly more red orange. This is the white yellow audio flicker blade. This is the electricity blade, one of my absolute favorites. In person, this is just really intense and awesome looking. The crystal chamber is really sweet looking too. The two crystals that are in here just illuminate really, really well. It's kind of a crapshoot with crystals. You never know how well they're going to illuminate. Some are just so much better than others. And these two really, really illuminate well. This is the Sith Seizure blade, which is a red-white RGB strobe. Very cool effect. This is a regular strobe. Unfortunately, the strobe blades don't look quite as cool on video as they do in person because the camera shutter is not fast enough to really pick up the speed of the flashing. So in real life, this is just flashing crazy fast. It's not doing this sporadic flicker thing that you guys are seeing. This is I think this is just a standard yellow. Blue flash on clash. This is a fun gradient, which is orange to yellow to white, and in person this looks phenom. It looks like it's just really hot and cooling towards the tip, but the color really works. Check out the reflection of the color in the monitor to get a better idea of what the blade looks like. Really Just an excellent color. And this is another gradient blade. This is red to orange to yellow. I'm really digging the gradient blades lately, as you guys have probably figured out, but they're just, they're kind of a cool change. It's not something you see a lot of, and you can do a lot of different stuff with them because you can do basically as many different colors as you want jammed into the blade. I find 4 or 5 to be kind of the max that looks good, but hey, I've definitely been wrong before, so. This guy is a orange to white. It's the POV blade. Fire blade, because of course. This is an orange-yellow fire blade, which looks more like a... It's not like a fire blade, it's more like... It's more like an inferno, I guess you'd say. Like, think really large torch. There's not so much red in it, so it's not burning quite as hot, but it's just... It's like a fire spout instead of a fire stick. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but it makes sense to me. Red cycle blade. And yeah, you guessed it, next up would be the orange cycle blade. With my new handmade font that I made out of a whole bunch of different fonts, cutting and pasting stuff together. But the sound effects are just awesome for that. Battery indicator blade, which means we're back to the beginning. Now let's twist her around. Lock it back in place. Now we get to use these 2 buttons instead, which makes life quite a bit easier. Before we do that, I'm going to put this little greeble back in to lock the chassis and everything in place, so that the saber is as solid and stable as it ought to be. For this guy, the sound fonts and the programming were definitely a challenge, similar to the Ben Solo saber, because it's not a character saber that's real common. There aren't a whole lot of sound fonts for Imperial Knights, and it's not something I've done before, so I spent a whole lot of time creating blade colors and blade presets that are new, or at least a spin on new, and a lot of sound fonts that are new or different, and some that are semi-homemade, created by mixing and matching other fonts, but I'll run through a couple here so you guys can see the different kind of flavors of the sounds of this guy. This one I love for the Imperial Knight. The color is awesome. It's like a blood orange color. It's got a really throaty, heavy-duty rasp and an awesome hum. Really metallic,